Got one. Yeah, one attendee.
We have,
Now you're rising.
yep.
Oh, there we go. Any page.
So it is live.
Hmm?
We are live.
Could you?
Good evening. We're going to give it a few more minutes to allow a few additional people to come in before we start. That's all right.
Shelley, can you go back in the attendees tabs and just see who comes in?
Yep.
I'm going to wait to start.
Oh, okay.
Well, good evening. My name is Carl Augusta, and I'm chairing the listening panel. And I need to get a couple of formalities out of the way before we actually start going through the agenda. And I understand I am to read a statement here. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with state open meeting law pursuant to section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary.
Carl, hold up. This is, we're not, I thought we agreed we were not subject to open meeting law regulations. We shouldn't be doing anything pursuant to any open meeting law or any disclosures about change to open meeting law.
You are correct.
Yes, we're here just like, you know, as a courtesy to the public, right? We're not here pursuant to any open meeting law.
Okay. I was-
No, I'm sure you were, but like, and maybe I have old news, but like we're not a duly appointed board that's been confirmed by the city council. We are just volunteers.
Joel is correct, and I apologize for reading that, but this is an informal board to make sure that we get as much information as we can from the public that we can provide to the administration. First of all, I'm going to go through a brief overview in a minute, but when we open it up to the callers, we'd appreciate it if you'd raise your hand by using the raise hand button, or from your phone dial *9 to raise and lower your hand. You will be allowed to speak when the board calls upon you from your phone dial *6 to unmute and mute yourself. And with that, I'd like to just provide you with an overview of what we hope to accomplish here, as well as introduce you to the panel members. For that first slide. All right, just for background, we will be running 6 sessions very similar to this through early June. So there's plenty of opportunity to participate, and we do encourage participation. We'll be typically running these meetings from an hour to an hour and a half. Again, we encourage as much participation as possible. Go to the next slide, Shelley. There we go. First of all, the mayor made it clear to us that his goal is to do the most good for the most people over the most time. Our role as a listening panel is to solicit community input on allocating the funds and a report on the issues and the opportunities that emerge out of these meetings. Next slide. I think most of you are aware already that the city has $23 million as a combination of county and municipal allocations. A couple things to keep in mind is that there are many parts of the American Recovery Plan Act. This is just one part of it, having to do with the local and state funds. The funds are to be used for costs that are incurred after March 3, 2021, and be obligated by the end of 2024 and expended by the end of 2026. The final rules came out earlier this year and went into effect on April 1st, providing greater flexibility than under the the interim rules, and we'll touch on that in a few minutes. Next slide. There are a number of key categories that you can find this information on the city's website as well, the ARPA website, but to support public health response and address negative economic impacts, you often see those two together. To replace public sector lost revenue, premium pay for essential workers, investing in water and sewer infrastructure, and investing in broadband. In terms of resources that are available to you, on the City of Gloucester website, you'll find links to Department of Treasury, to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and to resource documents that be very helpful to you. I would particularly point you to the final rule overview, which is the second bullet under the Department of Treasury. It has a comprehensive table of contents and can be very helpful for people who are trying to better understand what this is all about. On the City of Gloucester website, there's an area to provide input on proposals. It's a Google Forms. You'll find it on the website, and it's a way of providing input after these meetings. So if you present us with information, you have additional information you'd like to provide, and maybe some supporting documentation, you can go to Google Forms and you'll be able to provide that. Next slide. In terms of the guidelines, we ask any speakers to provide their name and address. We'd like you to keep your comments to about 3 minutes. The panel members may ask you questions for clarification and request supporting information. And we ask that everybody respect all the speakers and their perspectives. And to the extent possible, speakers are asked to help the panel define the issues affecting organizations, individuals, and segments of the population, help us understand the impacts, and propose or suggest actions to address them. The members of the panel are listed here. Tony Gross and Paul Romery are on Zoom. Joe Favazzi is here, as is Gerald Oppenheim and Gretel Seeley. There are 3 people from the Economic Development Industrial Corporation and 3 from Capital Improvement Advisory Board. I think what's important, though, in this list of people is they represent many different interests, including budget and finance, participation on school committee, various city boards, and low-income advocacy related to energy and housing and so forth. So it's a diverse board with extensive background in areas that should be relevant to this exercise. And with that, we'd like to thank you for participating. If there are any of the panel members have something they'd like to add, please do so. Otherwise, we'll go into taking some calls.
I think Tom Balf is here also on Zoom.
Oh, and I overlooked Tom Balf, who is from the Economic Development Industrial Corporation as well.
13.
And we invite
13 attending. Those 13 attending.
Okay. If someone would raise their hand, and we'd like to invite your comments.
Nelson. Valerie Nelson.
Valerie Nelson, welcome.
You should ask this.
Yeah. Thank you. Valerie Nelson, 7 Sunset Point Road. I actually have a question, and I should get off and go to the zoning amendments meeting of the City Council in a bit. The question is that I saw a presentation from last year of housing advocates at the state level, and they made the case that under the economic development impacts category, you could put funding for rental assistance, construction of affordable housing, and a number of housing projects in that. And that's an important question for me, because I think that what's coming out of the zoning amendments hearings is that people are troubled. A lot of people are troubled by the particulars, but they widespread across the community is a concern for attending to affordable housing. And so my question is it your understanding that one of those 6 categories could actually fund affordable housing projects of a variety of types?
Let me answer it in a couple of ways. One is there is a fact sheet among the resources that were listed that specifically speaks to housing. You'll also find that on highlights of what types of programs have already been undertaken, housing is a priority in many jurisdictions. And there's considerable flexibility to how various communities have addressed the housing issue. But I think you'll find the fact sheet on keeping families in their homes and building more affordable housing very relevant and very helpful to you on this. I should note that our role is to listen, to get information and provide guidance. We're not in the decision-making loop. It's a decision ultimately for the administration to make. But again, there's considerable information that is available to the public to help guide their thinking on making proposals and outlining interests.
I would just add that if you have specific suggestions or ideas, those are exactly what we seek.
Yes, correct.
Joe McKechnie,
Pardon?
Joe McKechnie.
Joe McKechnie?
Joseph, Joe.
Joe McKechnie.
I'm hoping you can hear me.
Can hear you all right.
Great. Yeah, I am also on your committee for the Capital Improvement Advisory Board. And I am wondering what we're looking at really with all this money. And one of the questions I have, or one of the statements I would say, is that the mayor ran on a very strong panel that he would fix our roads. And Haverhill, I know, has spent some of this money to fix the roads that were in disrepair within their community, and it's been approved and sanctioned by the state and federal government. So I think one of those things that should be added to our list of things to be done and funded with this money is our roads, whether they be public and or private. And just throwing that out there, you know, I know we've done a hell of a lot about affordable housing and all of this and all of that, but let's take care of those that are here already and think about that for a minute.
Joe, that's good input and appreciate it. And there is, under the final rule, greater flexibility in terms of how cities are able to use funds. The flexibility into what's defined as the lost revenue component of it, and roads appear in a number of jurisdictions where there are issues that are not unlike, I think, what Gloucester faces, and so that's good input, and we'll make sure we capture that.
I think the other thing to consider is that during COVID, as much as that I hate to use that as an excuse, but the roads have been beaten to death by travel, by the delivery trucks, the UPS trucks, the Amazon trucks, everything, and you can imagine they've beaten our roads to death. And we might think about that as a consideration when we start looking at these funds.
Very good. Thank you.
Sunny Robinson. Yep.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sunny Robinson. I live at 20 Harvard Street. I am very glad of this opportunity to be sharing some ideas with you tonight. I do apologize for not having time to look at any of the posted materials ahead of time, but I also want to jump right in and advocate that we set aside at least 10% of the ARPA money coming to the community to go toward affordable housing. I think it is very clear that we can do this, and I think that we indeed should do it. For supporting documentation, I would refer you all to the housing production plan, which speaks very clearly from 2017 until now in terms of the kind and breadth and depth of affordable housing that we need. And I'm not talking about just low income housing. I am talking about housing across the spectrum of the average person who lives in Gloucester. For at least 20 years, we have been talking about the lack of sufficient amount of housing to house the multi-income of working and middle income families in this community. And if, for example, you look at the waiting lists at the Gloucester Housing Authority, they are enormous, both in terms of numbers of families waiting for housing and the number of seniors waiting for affordable housing. So I very strongly, from the beginning, urge you all to look at the housing needs of the community and set, we are getting, thank goodness, a substantial amount of money. And I would very much like to see at least 10% of that to go to the range of affordable housing. And I'm not just meeting the state requirement of affordable housing being 80% of the area mean income. I'm meeting 30%, 50%, 80% across the spectrum of what we need. And I have not had a time to take a look at the Google form and send you any ideas in writing, but I will certainly do so. And I would just add in closing that my concern and interest in affordable housing started in 2000, when from 2000 to 2008, I was the city's public health nurse and saw how desperate the need of housing was for helping people sustain their health. So we're still at this, and I hope we will make some progress, because in fact, we have not made substantial progress anyways near what we need to get to 10% of our housing stock being affordable. So thank you for your initial attention. I'm sure I will participate in further sessions.
Thank you, Sonny. That was very good input, and it only took you 3 minutes and 20 seconds. But that was very helpful. Thank you.
Valerie Nelson.
Oh, Valerie Nelson,
Before we go back to people who already spoken, is there anybody else? Should we ask?
is there anybody else there?
No, nobody else. Oh, Maggie Rosenau.
Yeah, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll go back to people who've spoken before.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have a question that concerns the impact of COVID and the mandates that have come down about the requirement for meetings to be held both virtually as well as in person. And this has had a negative impact on having meetings in City Hall. As probably most of you know, I have been chair of the City Hall Restoration Commission for going on 17 years. I am not speaking as a representative of the commission tonight, however, but I do have this question as to whether or not the requirements for upgrading the electrical system would be potentially covered by these funds. And one of the major reasons for requiring these electrical upgrades is the fact that there is not a fire suppression or functional fire alarm system in City Hall. This obviously is of grave importance to the commission, and I would think, and also to the fire chief, because if City Hall were to have some kind of fire, that would have a huge negative impact on the surrounding area. So that the question is, could some of these funds be actually used to help facilitate this project moving forward? And thank you.
Obviously that's a question for the administration, but it's a very good point. It's been raised. We will certainly carry that point forward as well. And under the lost revenue component, as it is in the final rule, there is considerable flexibility to address the needs of public buildings, including schools, ventilation. So communities have already done similar things, and that's a good point in terms of public safety of City Hall and the use of the hall for public meetings. Thank you.
Sorry, we're getting feedback. So if people want to raise their hand a second time, you'll bring it back in.
Okay, Adam Barber.
Hi, everybody. Adam Farber here. I own Mark Adrian Shoes at 103 Main Street. Took over from my father about 5 years ago. I wanted just to get a little clarification. I'm confused about all these different funding sources. Is the local rapid recovery plan part of this, or is that a completely separate initiative?
This is the ARPA local, state and local recovery plan with allocations from the county and from municipal funds. There are other components of ARPA, and it is confusing. For example, the funding that the governor has been talking about through ARPA is a different component than this in particular, and so there are a number of different components. So what you should focus on is really the state and local recovery portions of it. And again, the highlights on the website, the Department of Treasury overview in particular is a very good and easy to scan view of the components that relate specifically to this part of ARPA.
Okay, I guess over the winter there were listening sessions for the rapid recovery from a business perspective, and there's on the city website a 116-page document with ideas that came out of that. I don't want to dig into that if this is not the right venue for that. I just didn't know if they're tied together, or are we talking about two separate things?
I think we're talking about two different things. However, under the state and local, if you look at what other jurisdictions have done under phase one, downtown revitalization is a component in a number of communities. So it is separate, but it's something to I think keep in mind as we go through this process.
All right, so I won't dig into it in great detail because it's all there on the city website, but I did want to point out the things that I'm most passionate about, I think would make the biggest difference in terms of downtown revitalization. Number one would be a parking analysis and really understanding where our parking is, how we can better wayfinder signage to drive visitors to appropriate parking. Also would be there's an idea out there to create a formal downtown association, whether it be a Main Streets program or a similar type of organization. Right now, there's lots of different groups trying to do very similar things, and getting it all under one umbrella with a full-time staff or maybe a time and a half staff person would go a long way to getting some cohesive unity down here. So I don't want to dig in too deeply, but I would direct you to that PowerPoint presentation that has some really good ideas for the business community, which obviously is a large tax base.
Thanks, Adam, for that. We'll do that, but also you might follow up with on the Google Forms with any additional thoughts that you have specifically for this and any particular proposals that you think would be relevant to what we're trying to do here as well.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
Carl, before we go on, is there anyone out there who has spoken, has raised their hand again? We're just still, it's our first meeting as a group, and so we're still working through the process. So if you've seen that you were, removed or a hand was lowered, that was just a double check to make sure you were intending to re-raise your hand. So we're not trying to force your hand down. We will get back to you. We just want to let you know, because obviously we're just trying to keep things moving along. I didn't want anyone to get offended by the fact their hand was put down. It was just to make sure it really was supposed to still be up. So thank you.
Alex Egmont.
Alex Egmont,
Yes, good evening.
good evening.
First off, thanks so much for having these listening posts. I think it's a really important part of what our city does. I am the president of Fishermen Youth Soccer. Our organization provides athletic support for over a third of our student population within the city. We provide these at Magnolia Woods in West Gloucester. It's a fantastic area and underutilized by the city. It has begun to degrade over the last 4 years or so as we've watched our fields become less usable due to a lack of maintenance and a lack of attention to the needs of that space. So we would really like the city to take a look at putting some of these funds towards maintaining and improving the situation up there at Magnolia Woods, and maybe working a bit with some of our youth organizations to create a space up there that's a little bit more usable for everyone.
That's good. And thank you for that. And we certainly will capture that and include it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're circling back now.
So is anybody who has not spoken yet that would like to speak? We have two who have spoken previously that I assume through the chair we'll go back to, but before we go to repeats, is there anybody else? If so, raise your hand. If you're on the phone, *9. If you're on Zoom, the raise hand button. Put that down. I've been,
Nobody else.
All right, well, let's, anyone who has spoken before that would like to talk again, Valerie Nelson.
Yeah, well, I find this conversation really, really helpful. And I'm kind of concluding that the best thing you want from the community is what some of our priorities are.
Yes.
Sunny agreed that housing is a priority. And then, so then there are a couple of questions that, or downtown development or Magnolia Woods or whatever. Because then the next question it would be, would those projects be eligible? But then also, would other parts of state allocated funding be more appropriate to go after for support of those? So given all those uncertainties, maybe for the public, which I'm kind of attentive to, is to just throw at you a lot of different ideas, and then you can sort through those questions of what's eligible, but also, are there other funding streams that those kinds of projects could be met? The one that I would add is that I have seen in the last year, New York Times articles from Alaska and Maine, and they have fishing boats and all this investment in local seafood supply chains. Clearly, the fishing industry suffered losses during the pandemic that are documented. And I would certainly submit a proposal that on the economic development impacts category that you all consider investing in useful projects in the fishing and seafood processing sector. So it could be that other state funds are more appropriate, but maybe I should submit housing, fishing industry, whatever, and then you all, so I'm sort of developing an image of what the system would be by which you take input. I think the bottom line is that for the public to know that those 6 categories you put out there are not going to drive them away into, well, there's nothing there that I see, but actually that you're interested in hearing about using this money for productive investments in our community. And so correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think it's a great opportunity to get the public to weigh in on what they think is useful going forward for the community. And then you can decide whether, the city can decide whether the ARPA money is the best place to put that. Is that approximately right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. There are, as you know, many different funds out there. There's in addition to the ARPA funds, there is the infrastructure bill that the governor is dealing both with the infrastructure bill and ARPA funds as part of a package that he's working on. There are many other funding sources that are out there. We would not want to exclude anything in particular. Those 6 categories, when you look at some of the background material, such as the overview I've mentioned a few times, you'll see that there's quite a bit of flexibility in there. And to the extent that someone can define an issue and how it's affected them either personally or as an organization or the community at large, and then help us as a listening panel understand what the implications are, which I think in terms of Magnolia Woods, I think we had a good explanation of the issue and the impacts, as well as a suggestion on what actions could be taken to address them, assuming for a moment that it could fall under the state and local recovery funds program.
Yeah, I would just add that bear in mind that the money has to be obligated in a year and a half. And it's going to be actually spent out the door in 3.5. So the more specific, I mean, hearing that we need housing is great. I think there's a lot of agreement about that as an example. Same thing with the fishing industry. But to actually obligate some money for something in a year and a half, we've got to have some specific proposals. And so I've come back to one of the other listening sessions with some, for example, or submit them in writing, whatever. It will be very helpful if everybody could just be as specific as could be. And I think the Magnolia Woods and the downtown proposals is good examples of specificity that would be helpful to us.
And I think that many of the people who are likely to participate in this are members of organizations that have resources representing a particular interest within the community. And to the extent an organization that does have some resources representing a particular interest can sort of dive into this a little bit deeper and develop some thinking around it. And even to the extent of perhaps linking it back to some of the general information that is available within the overview or the final rule itself. There's a lot of flexibility in this, and it's well worth your time, I think, to be able to take a good look at the material and provide us with the best information you can, because that will certainly help us provide the best information that we can to the mayor and the administration.
Yeah, and actually the suggestion you made, Valerie, of coming up with ideas and letting somebody else sift through what's eligible, what's not, I think that's right on. Just brainstorm. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'll worry about this, but there'll be plenty of time to figure out what's eligible and what's not.
Thank you.
Joe McKechnie.
Joe McKechnie?
Joe.
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 Joe? Joe McKechnie, do you have a comment or a question?
He's muted.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, unmute. Am I ready?
You are. All
Okay.
yours.
Firstly, I note that the police station needs a large upgrade. Maybe that should be added to the list. I'll leave it at that. I don't know what they're saying they want to do, but maybe that's a thing for the list. Water sewer upgrades. I noted today in the Times that we're going to spend or borrow money, multiple millions of dollars for sewer and water upgrades. Why would we borrow money when we can pay cash? Done. Roads, I said that before. I also question all of this affordable housing talk of whether our current infrastructure can handle additional homes, sewers, roads, cars, etc. Just leave it at that. A few more. Ventilation for our city buildings. Can we upgrade the ventilation systems to improve them so COVID might not be as big of a problem within our municipal buildings? Prepare for the next pandemic. What can we PPE ourselves up and have a stockpile somewhere that is administered by the city government and or the police or emergency management system, that we have this stuff available to ourselves so we can put it in our school systems and our city government, so that immediately, instead of waiting for the Chinese to develop it, that we have it in our hands.
Those are all, I think, all very good points. And I believe the city certainly has the capability of looking at the issues you identified, some of which have been in the news very recently. But school ventilation, Maggie Rosa brought up City Hall, and there's the police department story recently, and there's the roads, there's Magnolia Woods. I mean, all of these things have benefit to the community, fairly widespread, so that they certainly are appropriate to be captured within the work that we're doing here, and conveying that to the administration in one way or another.
Thank you.
No one else has any hands up this time.
No one else has their hand up right now. We can make this a fairly brief meeting this evening. I think as panelists, I think we probably learned something.
Valerie's got her, yeah, Valerie's in there.
So, I mean, so I'd like to hear from some, I don't want this to become a back and forth between we need A, we need B.
Yeah.
We've heard A advocated for, we've heard B advocated for. And I'm hesitant to hear responses about why A is better than B at this point. Really, just we've heard A, we've heard B.
Yeah.
It's Rocky Neck Art Colony.
That's
Yep.
new.
Joel just made a very good point. Our purpose here is not to get into a debate or to go back and forth on what's good, what's not good, disagreement or agreement on various points among the presenters. I think everybody's perspective is important. It's worthwhile. We'll have to sort through that. So we do want to avoid getting into debate on the pros and cons, at least at this stage in this process.
The pros are okay, just not the cons.
So Rocky Neck Art Colony.
Rocky Neck Art Colony?
I completely agree with you all. I completely agree, and I'm just putting some points out there and thoughts that we might consider during this process.
And we appreciate it.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
This is Courtney Richardson. I'm the director of the Rocky Neck Art Colony. I'm a little late to the meeting, so I don't know if this came up already, but I just know one of our challenges is the parking situation in East Gloucester. And I just think it would be great if we could, put some efforts and energy into studying solutions to this, whether it's improvements in public transportation, looking at more transportation by water throughout the city, even remote parking lots, just to, that would benefit everybody. I think Adam earlier mentioned parking was an issue as well. So I just wanted to throw parking solutions into the mix. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Maggie Rosa.
Maggie Rosa?
Okay, one of the challenges, the biggest challenges that faces Gloucester is providing good paying jobs for its youth. And in many ways that requires bringing new industries into Gloucester. I do not know if you have considered or any of the options, but what is required to attract new industry into Gloucester? Do we have the appropriate infrastructure to attract people?
I just turned to Jerry Oppenheim from the EDIC, and Tom Balfour's was chairing the EDIC. I think is still on with us. I don't know that the ARPA funds we're talking about here specifically would provide for that type of initiative. It's certainly something we can look at and consider here, but and I don't know if either Tom or Jerry have any comment or Rel.
Well, yeah, I have this thought. Obviously, at the EDIC, we've given a lot of thought to that. And a couple of things that come to my mind are, one, that you know something about, Maggie, that'd be workforce training and workforce education. But it'd be helpful to have some specific proposal along those lines if you could develop something for one of the next sessions. And people have already mentioned housing, and at all income levels, up to at least the average workforce housing. So again, specific proposals, bearing in mind that we gotta get the money spent pretty quickly.
And I hate to keep pointing back to the resources that are available from the Department of Treasury, but there are other documents from Treasury that look at what various states have done under phase one, and workforce development does show up in there. So it would be worth taking a look at what some states have done with workforce development, some communities, not just states, but cities and towns.
Maggie Rosa. I'm sorry, Valerie Nelson.
Valerie?
So Joel, I'm not advocating for anything in particular. I'm really trying to understand the process so that the public can know. And this has been a very helpful discussion. I hear that the public could submit comments about what priorities they have. For example, is it housing or jobs or mental health? I've seen surveys in Salem that get at the public weighing in on their basic areas of most concern. But you're also interested apparently in actionable proposals from organizations that would actually take on and use the money. So that's very useful. I think you have two different audiences there that you're saying. A related question then is, which I'm also hearing, could this money be used for quote unquote studies to assess parking needs or to assess workforce training? Are studies allowable uses or only actual capital infrastructure projects? So that's one last question I would raise. But I think what I'm hearing is that you view this as an opportunity to get a general sense of where the public is, as well as organizations submitting actionable proposals. And then to say again, are studies allowable or only capital projects?
Oh, I can't answer that question. I don't know. But I think to go back to the points I think you made earlier about what would be most helpful is, first of all, defining the issues. What are the issues? Magnolia Woods, for example, transportation in East Gloucester and downtown, the physical state of city buildings, recreational opportunities that would help various parts of the community, healthcare in the public health in the event of a reemergence of another strain of COVID. Are there areas like that that could be city capabilities to deal with a crisis? So there's a lot of different areas that could be considered some priority ranking. And but to help that process, it would be helpful for us to really understand what the impacts are and the the positive, negative impacts and positive impacts of some actions. And then to the extent that people can do it is to propose specific actions or recommendations for consideration by the city that once we get through our process, we would either forward as a recommendation or provide some context around it. But again, we're not subject experts. Our goal is to try to gather as much information, put it together in a meaningful way that is cogent and comprehensive and usable by the administration.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is on the subject of planning, I'm not sure, but planning is a permissible objective here, but I'd be surprised if it were not. But we'll figure that out. But in the meantime, I think it would be very helpful if folks could identify problems that could be addressed by planning. And a couple of folks have already talked about parking and public transit. That would take to be an example of that. So if there's other areas that would profit from some planning before we take a fly first, aim later approach, then I think that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tom?
I just wanted to weigh in, and at least in my mind, sort of encourage Valerie or others that as the issue of a planning document or doing a study the answer is it depends. But so, for example, if there was a priority for adding ventilation for public health reasons in municipal buildings or school buildings, I mean, clearly you would need to do a feasibility study first before you would then implement the plan. So, I mean, I think that I think there is the possibility of funding plans if they were leading to actionable initiatives or projects that could be accomplished, under the timelines prescribed by the funding mechanism. So again, I certainly wouldn't discourage it could be that there needs to be a plan, whether it's parking or ventilation system or other things before. But I think it's keep your eye on the actionable project or initiative, not necessarily whether or not a plan is allowable. Thanks.
Yeah, good point.
Alex Egmont.
Sure. Alex Egmont?
Hi. I've heard a couple mentions of providing you guys with sort of an outline of a plan, a way that
Can't hear you. Alex, we've lost your voice. I think you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're off mute now, but we still can't.
Yeah, we
hear
still
you,
can't
Alex.
hear you.
So, besides the Google form, is there an email address, like, or does the Google form have like a paragraph style input where if you wanted to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so Alex, I don't know if this is where you're going with it, but arpa.gloucester-ma.gov has a form to fill out. And so if there was an actionable plan that had, steps and or dollar amounts and or priorities, that sort of thing, you'd be able to kind of give a detailed written explanation as to how you foresaw if funds were allocated to your project of choice, how those funds would be applied, or what the priority applications would be. And again, I'm not sure if that's where you're going with this, but that would be an available way to provide this committee, this board,
Yeah.
sorry, this group we're neither, we're a group, provide this informal group with actionable steps and suggestions. We through that form at arpa.gloucester-ma.gov.
If you go to the ARPA site, as Joel just indicated, there's a block for click here to submit a proposal form. And if you just follow that form, it'll give you what you need.
Lowered his hand, so he lowered his hand, so.
Should we adjourn this thing?
If there are no further comments, I think we'll adjourn for this week. And again, we encourage your participation, and to the extent you may be involved in various groups, love to hear from the various groups from time to time. The next meeting is the 25th at 6 o'clock. And we don't need a motion.
No, all done.
All right, we stand adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Tom. Good night, Paul.
See you later.
Go to the city council meeting.